The video stopped recording there because I didn't have any space on my phone. But now we've got some space. So it's time for Sonnet number 1 by the one and only Billy Shakes. Shaki Spiari. From fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decease, his tender air might bear his memory. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feed'st thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies, thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. Though thou art messed up, though that art now the world's fresh ornament, and only herald to the gaudy spring, within thine own bud buryest thy content, and tender churl makest waste in niggarding. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due by the grave and thee. Blah, 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 blah. So wordy. There's an N word in there. You can look that one up. Niggarding. It's a completely different word from the word that we are not allowed to say. From fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decease, his tender air might bear his memory. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feed'st thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies, thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament, and only herald to the gaudy spring, within thine own bud buryest thy content. Content, not content. You're burying your content in the bud. Yeah. From fairest creatures we desire increase. What we see that's beautiful, we want more of it. That thereby beauty's rose might never die. Just in case something else stops being beautiful, then there'll always be something beautiful. But as the riper should by time decease, his tender air might bear his memory. So, the beautiful thing, it should die eventually. It has to die. Everything has to transform at some point. But, as the riper should by time decease, his tender air might bear his memory. So his heir, H-E-I-R, his son or the offspring, will bear his memory. Just like you bear the genetic code of your father, or your mother, or your ancestors. You're bearing their memory in your body. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feed'st thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel. But you, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feed'st thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel. I think it's like being obsessed with your own eyes, your own beauty. Feeds thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies. That fuel, that self-substantial fuel, feeds thy light's flame. I don't know, I'm a bit lost to be honest. Feeds thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies. It's like you're feeds thy light's flame, your light's flame, with self-substantial fuel, because you contracted to your own bright eyes. I'm a little lost. I think it's saying that If you become obsessed with your own looks, your own beauty, and you sort of contracted, you're stuck on just that, then you're creating a famine for yourself, because there's actually a lot of beauty. In fact, it will just keep going. There's an abundance in you. But if you're obsessed with how your looks might degenerate, and you're like, oh no, I'm losing my beauty, then you don't actually see that the beauty's still there. It's just, it looks a little different. But if you were to have a child, that beauty, even if you were ugly at the point that you conceived the child, the beauty would come back out, because it would emerge once again, following the natural course of things. Making a famine where abundance lies, thyself thy foe to thy sweet self too cruel. So if you're beating yourself up because you're looking old and ugly now, maybe. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament. So right now you're really beautiful. The whole world, you're like a beautiful bauble on the Christmas tree. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament, and only herald to the gaudy spring, within thine own bud buryest thy content, and tender churl makest waste in niggarding. I'm gonna have to look that one up. I'm not actually sure what that means. Within thine own bud buryest thy content. Actually, it's like he's talking to the flowers, but obviously he's not talking to just a flower. Maybe he's talking to himself. People say that it's to a young man. He has some sort of relationship with a young man. That's like the narrative voice is speaking to, or about. Which could be himself, or it could be his friend. It's been speculated that he had a friend who he was basing a lot of this on. I have no idea. Within thine own bud buryest thy content, and tender churl makest waste of niggarding. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due by the grave and thee. Pity the world, or else this glutton be. Within thine own bud buryest thy content, and tender churl. Not a clue. And only herald to the gaudy spring, thou art now the world's fresh ornament. I kind of want to take a leap and think about what I've read in some of the other ones, where he's talking about spring, winter. In winter, everything's frozen, and the bud, frozen in the bud, is the potential for new life that comes in spring. So maybe that's the ornament, like something frozen, like a frozen flower. And only herald to the gaudy spring. Within thine own bud buryest thy content, and tender churl makest waste of niggarding. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due and, by the grave and thee. The nice rhyming couplet on the end of all the sonnets. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due by the grave and thee. Oh, maybe he's saying, within thine own bud buryest thy content. I don't know. I think it's like, if you're obsessed with your own beauty, then you get really worried when it looks like it's running away. But you try to maintain it, But in doing that, you're actually losing your beauty. And if you just keep it all to yourself without creating children, then you're wasting the potential for that beauty to come around again. Which is interesting. Because more and more people these days don't want kids. They think it's bad or whatever. But they're depriving the world of all that beauty. Which kind of makes you wonder, what if they're thinking, yeah, why would I want to, plague the world with another version of me? This despicable, disgusting poison. Because I'm not gonna lie, I feel like at some point I was thinking somewhat along a similar line in the dark days. But now, of course, it would be such a waste to not share such amazing beauty with the world. That's all for episode 1 of The Poet Prince. We did some I Am Discourses, should help you with some manifestation. We did some Stoic philosophy, just looking at the foreword, or was it the preface actually? One or the other. Hopefully that will help with how to talk about things, how to zero in on the ideas, the things that you're trying to communicate, and be very particular and stringent about them. And don't make room for vagaries when you're in a disagreement with someone. And then the poem, have kids. The poem is, there's beauty. I don't know if I'd say in all things, but it sounds like everything has a cycle. And at some part in that thing's lifespan, in that cycle, there's peak beauty. And then it will pass. But just because it passes doesn't mean that it can't come around again. But if we focus on, oh, it's passed, it's over, the course of action that we take, thinking, oh, it's gone, will actually prevent any more beauty from coming back when it otherwise could have, if you just let the cycle go through the end and then come back around. Thank you.